very powerful story about a very dynamic and flamboyant defense attorney defending his client accused of murder. One day in the courtroom, he said to everybody there, "I will now prove that my client is innocent because in reality the victim is still alive. And to prove it, the victim is going to walk through the doors right now." And as soon as the lawyer said it, everyone turned their head to the back of the courtroom, but no one walked through the door. After a few very dramatic moments of silence, the lawyer looked back at the jury and said, "I made up the story of the victim walking through the door, but I did it on purpose. And it was to prove to you that at least the fact that you thought the victim could come through the door shows that you have a reasonable doubt as to whether or not the victim is alive and whether or not my client is guilty of murder. I would therefore," he looked at the jury and said, "ask you to return a verdict of not guilty." Sure enough, the jury deliberated long and hard, and when they came back, they delivered a verdict of guilty. The lawyer couldn't believe it. Here he thought he had made such a compelling argument, so he went over to the foreman of the jury, and he said, "I don't understand. Here I proved to you that there was a reasonable doubt that you thought the victim was still alive." The foreman looked back at the lawyer and said, "It's true that when you told us that the victim would walk through the door, all of us turned around to look at the back of the courtroom. The only person, however, who didn't look was your client. And that's when we knew that he considered himself guilty." You see, my friends, as we enter into Elul, into the season of change, so many of us can associate with the defendant in this story. We've already written ourselves off as guilty and simply assume that we're incapable of change in a relationship with Hashem. And so the very first step of Elul is not even Emunah in Hashem, it's not even believing in Hashem, but it's believing in us. It's believing in our capability to change and to become new and better people. It's about recognizing that just because I had a series of habits last year doesn't mean that that's who I have to be in the year going forward. And so the very first step of the month of Elul is to believe in ourselves, to believe that we can change, that we're not yet guilty, and that the best is yet in front of us. My bracha is that this Elul, all of us should believe in ourselves, our capacity to change, and ultimately to have the most meaningful relationship with the Almighty Himself.